So there's this interesting concept of heaven and hell, and the debate of well, why would it exist in a world where God is loving? And the reality is that the universe is simply accepting, which looks a lot like unconditional love. So it'll accept anything, and the reality is you can create hell within inside yourself through your thoughts, your actions, your words, the things that you choose to listen to, the things that you choose to pay attention to, the things that you use to empower you as far as tools or emotions. These can all create very, very unstable environments. And if you think unstable environment, what does that mean? Well, look at the world. It's a very, very unstable ecosystem. It's a very, very unstable political system. It's a very, very unstable system of economy, right? It's designed to be unstable because the instability creates a level of fear, so that the people that are less afraid can take more action or be more empowered than the average person. And I think that that's what people need to realize is all you need to do is empower yourself to use the right words. Stop saying what you think the truth is or whatever it is that you think the truth is, and just say to yourself what you'd like to hear. And it's not a matter of being full of yourself and believing that something that isn't true is true. It's saying it, understanding that you have the ability to make it true eventually. Because that's what your heart does. Every time your heart beats, it rearranges your body, but it's actually rearranging the electromagnetic field that your body is occupying. And because of the fact that the electromagnetism happens to flow through a toroidal field of vascular structure, it allows you to have an enormous amount of control over the body. And so it's like all these things that they don't really talk about as far as the metaphysics. A lot of the things that Nikola Tesla talked about and discovered and was later proven to be completely accurate. The Tesla coil is creating and expanding a magnetic field and collapsing it, and it brings in energy. It collapses that wave field and it brings in energy. Well, it's a toroid, which is a brain, right, on the top, and then there is a winding, which is a spinal column, and then there is a primary, which sends out a large pulse that affects both the toroidal and the secondary coil, right? So imagine a root chakra, a spine, and a brain, and then you have a capacitor, which absorbs energy. It's basically two sheets of paper so that it can absorb electrons, kind of like lungs and blood. And then you have the spark gap, which is essentially it's a specific distance or specific timing, really, because the distance creates a rhythm. Or you can use a frequency generator. So really, when you look at a Tesla coil, a frequency generator is your heart, capacitor is your lungs and blood. The root chakra, like your need to survive, is the primary coil. And then how you basically harmoniously pull in energy, the more harmoniously you pull in energy, the more energy is pulled into the toroidal field at the top. So if the secondary is resonating in perfect harmony, it'll pull in an enormous amount of energy. And that's exactly what the Wardenclyffe Tower was doing. He actually created a vortex where energy was flowing through it like a bathroom drain, but it was harmonized with energy rather than water. But the reality is they flow very similarly. So that's how Nikola Tesla was able to create ball lightning, is because you were looking at lightning that was falling into a funnel. And as it was being wound and spun on a 45-degree angle, it creates a sphere, it's a particle. It's the same thing that happens on the atomic level, but he made it happen with giant lightning in the sky, which is freaking awesome. So just the reality that life is so much bigger and what we're capable of is very powerful. And we have the ability to do exactly like what the Wardenclyffe Tower was doing, is creating a river of energy that flows through you. And as it flows through you, you can drink as much as you want. You know, that's why they shut that down, is because you couldn't meter the power. Anybody with a receiver could pick it up and it would just be there, resonating through the whole planet. And obviously, oil and fossil fuels, as well as copper and electrical industry. I mean, talking about trillions and trillions of dollars a year. I mean, it's essentially the largest cartel of organized crime, who've actively suppressed free energy for a long time, for a very long time. And that's why people can't hardly believe that it's true that we could have had free energy over 100 years ago. But it is true. You just need to wake up and look at it. And that's what I'm wanting. Can you imagine what it would be like to be able to travel anywhere in the world for virtually no cost because there's no fuel? You know, could you imagine what it would be like to be able to live in your home and be able to power it with your electricity and your refrigerator and your air conditioning and your heating during the winter, and not have to worry about where the dial was at, you know, because it was going to be too expensive? To be able to provide electricity for lighting, to be able to grow your own food, right? You could have a whole greenhouse. I want to build a garden in a garage, aquaponics, fish and plants. And this just, there's so much that's possible now, especially with how many people are finally starting to say, hey, we need change. Something needs to be done about this dictatorship of power. And it's literally power. It's literally energy that's created a dictatorship. That's the only thing that's allowed them to create this global empire, is you're able to restrict people's movement based on cost. You're able to make resources unavailable in certain areas, which causes depression. You can fund people who want to commit acts of genocide, like the Rockefeller Group did in World War II. Hitler wouldn't have had an army without Rockefeller, who was the first billionaire in America, by the way. So when the billionaires in America are creating eugenics facilities, and between 1880 and 1974, 126,000 plus people were forcibly castrated for being genetically inferior. When you have a history of slavery and genocide, 12 to 15 million Native Americans, 98% eliminated within just a couple hundred years of occupation. 12.5 million African Americans, 20% of them died before they ever even got into slavery. That doesn't even count the millions of people that died in slavery. And so when you talk about these countries that are built on ideals of liberty and justice for all, I don't see it. But I see a new future where people who have great ideas that will liberate people, truly liberate people, will be free to speak. And I would love to see that America. I would love to see what would happen when we believe we can be great again, because we don't have totalitarian dictatorship telling us what we can and can't know. You know, there are things that would help the world that if you told, they would call you a traitor. You know, there are things that you should know that if you were to say to the world, they would call you a traitor. I mean, think about what happened with Edward Snowden. You know, he's pointing out massive injustice, massive corruption, and they're calling him a traitor for not being willing to turn his back on what he knew was right. Neither will I.